Welcome back to another episode of the Thunderstock Show, a collection of valuable brainstorms to enhance your life, liberty, and pursuit of property. Today's special guest in the series is Dennis Baker. Dennis is an author, entrepreneur, media strategist who bridges technology, philanthropy, and personal development. He's also the CEO of DM Baker Media and Polis Assist Inc. And if you can't, for those of you that are listening, you can't see, he is the author of Building Your Board of Directors for Life. Dennis, thanks for being on the show today. Pleasure to have you on.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure.
Dennis, before you were an author, entrepreneur, and multiple business owner, I'm sure that you weren't born into those roles and those positions, but what are some of the things that you found in yourself in early development, childhood, that were the original stepping stones to get to where you're at today?
Well, when I was 17, 18, I basically stumbled upon this proverb about 50, it's called Proverb 15:22, just about essentially that, having many advisors, you make better decisions, to summarize it. And essentially that was like, it kind of was intriguing to me. I was just starting out. I think I was pretty ambitious for a 17, 18, 19-year-old. And I wanted to make just great decisions, and I wanted to build my network. And I just thought, well, if I start to build a group of people around me, advisors and mentors that can kind of, just help me with decisions and ideas and, be a sounding board for me. And then later on, I thought of them as stakeholders, but I thought that would help me along the way. And I just started pursuing them. I had a dean of a college who later became a chancellor, who I kind of connected with in college, and he kind of started introducing me to people. And then those people introduced me to other people, and so on and so forth. And I started to very, carefully and methodically kind of built some relationships with some people that, like I said, became stakeholders in my life for, until several of them passed away in recent years. So my entire life, essentially, they've been stakeholders, and they've been, I would say it's probably one of the best decisions I ever made, both personally and professionally. And I picked a diverse group of people that, maybe had different views, but one of the key factors with them was that they were all very successful and accomplished within their own spheres. And so I could, I knew that they were experts. So essentially, my first board of directors involved a CEO of a bank, a billionaire who had chairman of many companies, chancellor of a university, mayor of a city, president of a foundation, and a senior partner in a law firm, corporate law firm. And I kind of had them all, stakeholders in my life by the time I was, say 19, 20.
Whoa. Oh, that was my follow-up question was, were we still in your teens? And yeah,
I was,
19, 20.
19, 20. By the time I was 21, these people were very involved in my life. So it would have started, even, I think one of them might have started at 17, and then 18. Yeah, 18, I started building it. And
Man, so many questions, so little time. One question I have is, I have to ask, as an author, I would assume that you've been someone who's consumed quite a few books. Just judging behind you in the background, there's stacks of books there. At what age, this is an assumptive leap, have you read Think and Grow Rich, anything by Napoleon Hill or Dale Carnegie? Because when I look back at my own personal development journey, those books stood out to me. And one of the passages within there was, if you don't have a personal board of directors, like imagine one. Think of the people that you have that you are aware of, whether that be celebrities or those of influence, and imagine them at a round table, ask them questions. So is that a book that you were introduced to early on? I know you've quoted.
In all honesty, I wasn't aware of that book at that age. Maybe my mentors failed me miserably, or I don't recall them ever mentioning that book, but I wasn't inspired by that necessarily, although I think those books are very inspiring and they're right on target, but I hadn't seen them. So they weren't really a part of my process when I was young.
Which books
as I got older.
Go ahead.
Which books or authors inspired me?
Yeah, I was going to say,
I think a lot of the books that inspire me tend to be biographies, because I find that people's stories are stranger than fiction, and that some of the things that have happened to people, when I read about them, I'm like, this is not even possible. If this was in a if someone made a movie out of this, I'd say I wouldn't really believe it, but it's part of someone's life. And I think there's a lot of wisdom in learning history and learning about how other people have reacted and the decisions they've made in situations. And I know all sorts of people, like, from Churchill to William Wilberforce to even more recently athletes. Like I've talked about, Steph Curry in my book, and just all these different people. When I read their stories, they're just, they're unbelievable. They're amazing. And there's just so much you can learn if you're willing to pay attention to what they're doing and how they got there. I mean, I think all of them had role models. They had mentors. They had stakeholders, people who took an interest in their life, and they didn't just give them advice. They held them accountable too. They came to them when they said, you're really screwing up right now. And someone's going to tell you. And the best mentors, the mentors that I've loved the most there's a couple of them that have really given me their unvarnished opinions at different times in my life. And that's the best. That's the best advice. I trust them the most. I know that if I bring something to them and it's garbage, that they're going to tell me it's garbage, and then I need to go back and start over. But still, I have to balance everyone's opinions and everyone's advice. And I talk about this in the book. You still have to take responsibility for your own decisions. And there's been a few times, and I mentioned this in the book, where my board of directors have given me advice that is all sound and sage advice. But after assessing it for me personally and my own personal instincts and intuition, I'm going to do something different. And I'm the one who's responsible for the decision in the end. And I'm not a follower type of a person. So no matter who gives me the advice, it has to be something that I can logically assess and find that it makes sense for me. Ultimately, I can't just do what everyone else does, although there is value in ways of doing things, traditional ways of doing things, because obviously they were successful and that's what helped people get to a certain point. But anyway, yeah.
Reminds me
So
of a quote from one of my previous mentors or board of advisors. Said to me one time, he goes, Ross, I know quite a bit. The other people on this board know quite a bit, have a lot of experience. He goes, but take it all with a grain of salt, because there's things that we don't know, that we don't have experience on. There's contextual things that only you know within your own decision-making frame. So we'll
yeah,
help you the best we can. However, we're also imperfect. And I think everyone,
right.
I'm sure that you learned at an early age, and especially making, surveying what you've said about biographies, is sometimes the greatest stories have twists and turns that are greater than fiction. So, I'll pose this as a question. Knowing what you know now and the experiences you have, how do you look at giving feedback from, say, when you were 17 or 19, you were mostly like receiving and getting advice. Now you're almost in the role that some of these, billionaires and successful leaders of universities are, giving feedback to others as part of your mission. Like, what are some of the similarities and differences in that role reversal?
Yeah, I mean, similarities. I mean, I think the important thing is that I'm not just making an armchair snap decision about something or advice about something. I want to listen, and I want to listen carefully about what they're saying, what they're trying to do. And sometimes I don't give them advice right away. Sometimes I want to just wait and see where things are going before I give someone advice. But I also preface it, like you say, with, I don't have the entire picture. This is your decision to make. And you should get other advice. You should get a diverse group of opinions. Don't just listen to me. Having just one mentor, I think is almost dangerous. I think it's worse than having none sometimes, because you're just going to get that one point of view. And sometimes it could be a narrow point of view about a particular situation. But I think when I give advice, I try to give people the tools to make the advice. And I ask them the questions about, the when, where, why, what. What is it you're doing? What are you trying to accomplish? And often there'll be verbal processing along the way, and they'll come to a decision on their own without me having to really give them advice. But I do see a lot of things out there, and there's a lot of pattern recognition on situations and history and experience that I can apply to a situation and say, look, this is where I think this is going. And I think another thing that I really try to help people understand, especially young people, is to pay attention and listen to their intuition. They may not have defined what all their gut reactions are about or what their checks in their system are about a particular situation or person, but they can start trying to at least remember them and set them aside and be able to say, you know what? I'm in this situation. Everyone's telling me I should move forward, but there's a check in my system about it. Listen to yourself. Don't listen to everyone else. Your intuition is telling you something. It's subconsciously millions of points of data are coming in, and there's something that doesn't add up, and your brain's catching it, but you're not able to just verbalize it or formalize it or put it in the right box. But listen to that. Take the time, and over time, as you start to see more and more situations and gain more and more experience, you will start to be able to put those into boxes more readily and quickly. And that's a way to help train your intuition. And I find that my intuition about people, my intuition about situations has been the most valuable skill I have above everything else. A lawyer friend of mine, I went to my mentor, who was a corporate attorney. One time I was going to do business with someone, and it was a really exciting business proposition, but the guy I was going to do business with, I didn't feel 100% great about. There was just something about him that I wasn't sure I totally trusted him, or there was something in his background that made me think, I don't know if he's 100% trustworthy. So I went to him and said, can you create a contract for me that's ironclad or what have you, so that I'm fully protected. I can feel confident about going into business with this person. And he said, well, I can't make a contract like that. It's impossible. He says, because, it gets into the courts, and the courts can do all sorts of things, or they could drag it out and financially ruin you. Or, you could win and then they could still not end up paying you in the end. I said, what you do is he says, you don't try to build a contract around a relationship like that. You try to build a relationship around a contract, essentially. And you want to only do business with people you trust. So you got to trust your instincts. And when you do business with someone you don't trust, you're going to get screwed. You're just going to have a problem.
Yeah. And you may not know exactly how, when, and why, or the situation around it, but
it's likely to happen. Again, if you're feeling that check in your system about someone or something, pay close attention to that. Put the brakes on, or at least yield.
So I want to ask you a question about tactics. So if someone's listening and they think to themselves, well, Dennis says that having one mentor is sometimes worse than having zero, and I'm currently at 0 or 1. How do I start the process of, building this table, this board?
Well, it's really, today, it's so much easier than it was when I did it, because there's things like social media and LinkedIn, and we didn't have LinkedIn when I was, 19. And you can go on there and look at, friends and family who have connections to people who you're interested in, people you'd like to meet, or at least have a conversation with, and see where it goes. But your existing mentor too can be someone you could say, look, you're in my field maybe, or maybe you're a pastor or spiritual one. Can you recommend someone that I could at least have a coffee with and just have a conversation with? And most of the time they can say, yes, I'll introduce you to someone. And that one person could be a great fit, and maybe it's not. But you don't know until you start meeting them. And you can also try to connect, through social media outlets. But the best thing is an introduction. Trying to connect through social media is a little more difficult, because people are getting hit up all the time and they don't know who you are or what your angle is or what you're trying to sell them. I get so much stuff all the time myself. And I would say that the best thing is an introduction, but you can build from there. You can continue to build on those relationships. But one thing I would do is, besides being prepared and having good questions, and knowing how to draw out information from who you're going to see to evaluate for mentorship. One of the things I would do is, if you do decide that you want someone to be a mentor, don't ask them to be your mentor. That's just too pressurized. I've seen a lot of people who like being mentors, including myself, who've been asked, would you be my mentor? And I'm immediately frozen a little bit, because I'm not sure what their expectations are. I don't know what that's all going to entail. I think it's better to develop the relationship informally over time. And one day you'll just wake up like I did and realize these guys are all mentors, stakeholders. I'm having lunch with them periodically. I'm talking to them on the phone. I'm sending email. We're connected. I'm asking them for advice, and they're being mentors to me. So asking is definitely something I would not do. Some people have had I've had people say, oh, You need to be direct and you need to ask them what you want and tell them exactly what you want. I don't think that works. I think sometimes people don't know what they want or what they should want. They need to just develop the relationship and see if there's chemistry there. Like any relationship, there has to be some degree of chemistry. You have to have something you like talking about. You have to have something you care about together. You have to maybe even share a vision about a particular topic, whether it's political, religious, cultural, something. You need to have something to be able to have a point of contact on and then let that grow, let that become something bigger. And usually I find one of the best ways to also do that is to find a way to provide service
Mm.
to other people. You know, if your relationship is built around service, that makes it even more powerful. You know, that you're serving others, you're serving a nonprofit, you're serving a cause. That really brings that builds your relationship.
So, next question I have for you is, how did you get started in business? What was your first step or first stop along the entrepreneurial journey? I know that you own several businesses and, publish books, but like, where did it start? Like, how did you break into your career?
I think I had been working for a few different people, different companies at one point, and I had a background when I was at my first 2 years were at the University of Wisconsin. And
Uh-huh.
while I was there, I had this stakeholder group, this mentorship group, and a lot of people were asking me to raise money for them because I had created some projects in the community that I not only created, but I got funded by my mentors. So
Uh-huh.
they funded the project and people saw that and they started asking me, even the university, I ended up helping to raise an endowment for the university while I was still a student. And eventually the chancellor had to come to me and say, Dennis, we love what you're doing, but you need to stop. We want you to focus just on school. And then when you're done, come back and we'll hire you to do fundraising. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I'll do that. I had gotten a bit of a reputation for helping to raise money. So people started coming to me while I was still working for this other company, asking me, well, would you help us with this? And I realized, there's enough people asking me to do this that I should, one, start charging, and two, I could leave my day job. And so I
Mm.
decided to do that. And when I did that, the first year, I mean, I'm not going to lie, it was really, well, the first couple of years were really difficult. I had, I had many months where I didn't have any clients and I'm just, trying to figure out what's next. And then I'd have months where I was, it's feast and famine. And, but at the end of the year, when I did my taxes, I realized I had made more money than I did working, for a company. So I was like, well, it was more stressful. But at least if I can build on this, I can make it, yeah, a lot. I can make this work. So part of it was just saying, you know what, I'm staying with this. I'm not, there's no turning back.
Mm.
I mentally, emotionally burned my bridges behind me and said, I'm not going back. I'm not going to work for another company. I'm going to do my own thing because I love the flexibility, I love the rewards when something is successful, because I'm not sharing that with anyone, the financially or otherwise. But then when things fail, I'm the only one responsible. I don't have to look at someone else and say, oh, you guys screwed up the company and now I'm getting laid off. It's
Mm.
like, nope, I screwed up the company and I'm getting laid off, period. So I like that. That was kind of how I started. And I would say within a couple of years, I was making what I made that first year in a month.
Mm.
So, so there's no going back, and then, yeah, lots of things were just always added on to that I love to do.
So then at some point, you've formed your business, DM Baker Media and Polis Assist.
Mm.
In a quick elevator, what's the mission of those companies? And at what stage in your entrepreneurial journey did you land there? Because the vast majority of entrepreneurs I've talked to, there's maybe 1 out of 100 that their first ever business they started is the one that's been the one they've done their whole lives.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting, because my business it started out as a full service media marketing, PR agency,
Uh-huh.
fund development too, raising money. But there's so many other little things I've picked up that are tangential, but at the same time related, that fall under that I've gotten to a point where my own family doesn't really understand what I do anymore. They're like, I really don't get what you do. I know you do that, go here and do that. And you know these people and then and somehow you make money. I'm like, yeah, well, I mean, I'm at a point where, well, I've been at this point actually with some clients where I manage certain relationships and I get
Uh-huh.
paid for that. I get paid to introduce companies to people to certain people. That's all they pay me for. I mean, it's a weird place to be. And people are like, well, how did you get there? I'm like, well, it took a while of building out a network and relationships. Yeah. Now certain companies, I've got a tech company, an airline company. They hire me to just make introductions for them, and then they take it from there. It's a very unusual thing, but I do all sorts of stuff under there. I've ended up helping people in many different areas, from fundraising to publishing to
Well, Dennis,
digital.
I have to, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I have to say
Sorry.
that compound interest being what the seventh wonder of the world, it's not just with money, although you've experienced that where you've had months where it took you a year to make that amount. But it sounds like that work you put in on building your board of directors for your life just simply compounds faster and more uniquely than just putting money in the S&P 500. Obviously, would you
Yeah.
attribute that to sort of the progression?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think when people can come to you and you can solve a real problem that they have that other people might not be able to, because my network is extremely diverse. I think even there are very few marketing and media companies that have as diverse of a network. Sometimes they have a niche market that they work with. Maybe they're sports marketing, or maybe they're entertainment, or maybe they work in the legal or financial. But I have built out relationships, and I made a point of building out really diverse markets. I've had clients from cultural arts organizations like the ballet, to international aid organizations I've worked with, to I have professional athletes, to scientists, Nobel laureates, I mean, it's just, the range is so bizarre that when people come to me with a unique problem, I sometimes have a unique set of not just solutions, but unique set of people that I can go to try to resolve this issue. And that's why I've been able to help with, there's some people I didn't talk about in my book because they're known, and I don't want to get into their stories. But certainly I've helped with Miriam Ibrahim, the famous refugee who was going to be put to death in the Sudan. So helping with someone like her, being able to use my skill set to be able to help people like that in very unique, complicated situations. And being that I wasn't a government entity, that I could work with other nonprofits, other human rights groups, and to help to get her out, and then work with her after she got out, that lends itself to the kinds of things that, when put in the right situation, I can be helpful. So being a fixer, utilizing my network, like you said, that has built up and over time, and all of that is just part of a whole series of things that I get paid to do these days. And, and then I do some other things that were, like the Polis Assist was a company where I just had an idea about it. And it was out of frustration driving in LA, looking at these signs, because I go to LA all the time because I live in Santa Barbara, and seeing the signs and not understanding, if I could even park someplace, because there's 7 or 8 regulations on one sign. And I'm like, this is insane. Someone must have digitized this. And only to find out no one has. And so I thought, well, there's a business proposition here. Whenever you can solve a real world problem, you have a good business opportunity, I think. And I thought, well, I'm going to get this information. And as I explored it more and more and more, I realized that the cities don't want to digitize that information. They don't want to democratize it, which is what I did. But they want to keep it from people so that they can increase their parking revenue and their ticket revenue, which is very high. Because that's funds that go into the general fund, and it's unrestricted, and they can use it however they want. They love money like that. So they don't want the parking tickets to go away. And if people know the parking situation better, and they understand, they can look on an app and find out, where they can park, it's going to hurt their revenue for the cities. And so they didn't want to be helpful. So I realized I had to go hire my own team, create my own app, collect the data myself manually. Now I have a way to scale it and get it in a more automated way. But I collected all the data, 500,000 blocks of LA. I had it collected manually and then digitized. So that was quite an ordeal. And I think as I look at that, I say, oh, that's ridiculous and impossible, even to myself. But I came up with a plan to do it, and it was very inexpensive and fairly quick. I think within less than 6 months, I had it all. So I think at this point, I'm the only one who has all that information. And anyways, I made that available through the app, and now people can have a more level playing field, because getting parking tickets is a really serious problem especially for working poor people. When they get a ticket, they have to decide between feeding their family or paying $100 ticket. They make the choice to feed their family, and then it balloons and it turns into a massive bill. This 2016-17 report came out that the number one reason for Chapter 7 bankruptcy in the city of Chicago were parking tickets.
Whoa.
Yep.
Oh my
So
goodness.
poor families were getting those, and then they couldn't pay them, and then their cars were getting impounded, and the impound fees and everything. The only way to get out from underneath it was Chapter 7. And that's really cruel and draconian policies of the cities. So I went from just trying to solve a problem to realizing that there's a real social, cultural, political need here for an app that helps people make better decisions about parking. I mean, obviously, if someone's doing something illegal, they should get fined. But that's not what's going on in the cities. It's a revenue stream for them, and they don't care about the end user, the consumer, or necessarily making parking better, more accessible, because really most cities have a glut of parking. It's just not being distributed very well or properly or understood where it even is. So anyway, that's my spiel about that. But that's why I created that app. And yeah.
I wonder how much, if parking was universally free, there was no charge to park across the United States, how much revenue would be just not collected overall?
Yeah. Well, just from parking fines in the city of LA, it's close to 200 million. And then in
In
the
just
city of
LA? Only
and
LA?
just LA, and fine money, not parking fee money, but fines, what they collect in fines. And then in New York, it was, last I looked, and this was a few years ago, so it's probably even worse, but it was over 500 million.
So,
And that's a city most people don't even drive in, and it was over 500 million. So
oh my goodness. Wow. So there's multiple billions if you could across the whole United States.
yeah. Yep.
Okay. Well,
Billions
learned
and
something
billions of
today.
dollars. Yeah. So by doing this, by creating the app, I think it gives people the information they deserve as citizens. They should have this information, and it should be in a digital format, because we're in a digital world now. There's no reason it can't be, but the city will not do it. They will not create these digital formats. And so I made it available, and it's free. And I hope people, we're in the process of relaunching, because we had a little COVID we launched before COVID, and
Uh-huh.
obviously that killed us for a while. So now we're in the process of refreshing, relaunching, adding predictive AI, some various things to make it a much better experience. But the name Polis is the ancient Greek city state in its ideal form. So I picked that word because I want to make our cities more ideal. Parking is just one of the lower hanging fruit for me, bigger problems, but there's other problems we have in urban areas, and I want to make it better for people to be able to live in cities and have information for them, such as, where are there walking parks for your dog? Where are there clean bathrooms? Where is it safe? I guess I
Uh,
can park here, but is it even safe here? What's the crime rate?
right.
Having that layered in and say, look, I wouldn't park here tonight at this time of day. Crime is excessive and you're taking a risk. Things like that. So
So
that's what I hope.
between your mentorship, fundraising, media, app development, public service, when did the genesis for Author cross your mind? How did that origin story happen? What was your writing process like for this book?
Yeah, that's a good question. Essentially, I speak at schools sometimes, especially up where I live. And when I've spoken over the last 10 years to students and stuff, the professors have said to me, well, you have kind of a unique approach with your board of directors and how you kind of started out very young and everything. You should write a book about that. And I was just like, yeah, maybe I'm not really an author per se. So I don't know if I would want to write a book. It seems like a big undertaking. But in recent years, I've been working with a lot of publishers, getting a lot of people published. And one day last year was in New York with one of my publisher clients, or one of my publisher friends. And I said to him, if I wrote a book about this topic, would you publish it? And he's like, yeah, I'd publish that. And it's a major publisher too. So I was like, okay, that was easy. So I actually I went to Europe for part of the summer and came back and was busy. And then later on, and so that was in May, and then in September of last year, I came back and I said, hey, I whipped up a proposal for that book idea. I'm not holding it to you to do it. And he says, oh, no, I'm going to do it. You didn't have to give me a proposal. And then the next day I got the agreement, and then I had to have the book in 3 months after the agreement. So I actually had to sit
Uh-huh.
down and write the book. So that was like a bit scary at one point, and then, the whole editing process, just going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth with friends and the editors from the publisher and it's just, I thought I'd be able to put more stories in it. But then as I wrote them on paper, I thought, I can't tell that story. That's going to be a scandalous situation. So, but there still are some good stories in the book. Maybe in a later book, I might have some kiss and tell stuff, but I ended up, finishing the book. And then, it takes them a while to get you in the queue. And then I just came out September 30th. So yeah, pretty excited about that with Post Hill Press, Simon and Schuster distribution. So yeah, it's been pretty fun experience. So that's how that came about. Yeah.
So you said you had 3 months once to write it?
Yeah, I signed off on the agreement end of September. So October, November, December, and then January 15th it was due.
So I have to make an observation, two observations. One, collected 500, was it 500,000 blocks worth of data
Yeah.
for your app within 6 months.
450 square miles. Uh-huh.
Within 6 months, wrote your book from start to finish in 3 months, and then had a substantial board of directors in your life before you're 20. So to those that think that this thing takes an inordinate amount of time, you've proven that with concentrated effort, you can literally time travel, condense time, get quite a bit done in a short period. What are some useful mental frames or tricks or tips on how you were able to do that volume of work in the time period that you did?
Hmm. Well, some of it's in the book, especially as it pertains to decision making and mentorship. But I think part of it always is just, getting the right advice. Like sometimes I spend a good bit of time. One of my professors told me this, is that I think I've gotten a lot better on it, but I spend a lot of time making the decision. So I'll do a lot of research. I spend a lot of time. I'll be thinking about lots of things. But then once I make the decision, it's like I've made that decision, and I'm holding on to that decision and that idea and what I'm doing with it for dear life. Like this is it. This fails and I'm dead. So this is, there's no letting go. Now, I'm not saying I don't let go. I mean, I've
Sure.
there's certain people, stakeholders, things like that if they came to me and said, this is, or the writing was on the wall and it was impossible but I have my instincts, I do my research. And so I don't jump into anything. I'll take a calculated risk, but it's a calculated risk. And I've really calculated it. And for the most part, with some of the projects I've taken on, even though a lot of my projects, a lot of things that I've done, people have said, it's not going to work. It's impossible. I did the research. I had the intuition. I knew in myself that, it's going to work. I can't tell you exactly how, but there's something in me that says that this is going to work and I'm going to make it work. And then I do it. And 99% of the time I'm able to do it, and it's always, and then when I'm done, I'm surprised at myself. I actually am really, I'm stunned. I still am surprised when I look at, I have a Soho House membership in Hollywood, and I'm up on the top of that building, and I'm there often. It's at 20th floor of in West Hollywood of this building, and you look out and you see all of LA below. And I'm often up there, and I still, every time I look out at that city, I go, what kind of idiot would go and try to manually collect all the data in the city? And I am looking at that going, and I'm only looking at half of it. The other half is the valley on the other side of the mountain. And I'm only looking at half of it. And I feel just looking at it makes me exhausted. I'm like tired, or just looking at this, I can't even think about this. And it's like, but I did it. It's like, yeah, it's crazy. I don't know. Once I get an idea and I decide I can do something, I don't know. Yeah.
Going back, you said that you went to university in Wisconsin, correct?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I
And
went
now
there
you
my
live in
first
LA.
2 years. Well, I
Mhm.
went there my first 2 years or so. And then I took a year off and went to Sun Valley, Idaho to work on a ski resort. I needed a break and I went with some friends. So I don't know if you know Sun Valley, but that was an amazing
I
experience.
have friends in Boise, so I've been to Idaho and a little bit. Not too familiar with Sun Valley
Well,
particularly.
Sun Valley is a unique part of Idaho. I'll tell you, it's very, very, very bougie ski resort. Let's
Okay.
just say everyone that famous in the entire world comes and skis there on the weekend. It's insane. It's maybe Aspen might be like that. I don't know. There might be a couple, but but Sun
Hmm.
Valley is crazy.
So
Schwarzenegger, the
where
Kennedys,
did you
everybody.
grow up? Did you grow up in Wisconsin?
I grew up in partially in Chicago, and then we
Okay.
moved for junior high, high school, and then the little bit of college there in a town called Wausau, Wisconsin, kind
Okay.
of smack dab in the middle of the state. Probably the overall population of the area is about 100,000, not huge,
Yeah.
but it's not like a tiny little town either. Lots of industries. There's a lot of wealth there, a lot of big companies that were founded there: paper making, insurance, banking. There's some manufacturing stuff, some big companies. East Bay, a company when that was ended up being bought by a lot of companies were founded there. Window, cheese.
Hmm.
There's surprisingly a lot of money in that area. So I went to school, and then I came out to a private college called Westmont in Santa Barbara, California, where I finished school, and then I went on to the Hansard Scholars Program in London. I did that program with the London School of Economics, and then I wanted to always stay in Santa Barbara. Once I saw Santa Barbara the first time I ever saw it, I fell in love and was like, no, this is like the best place in the world. And I also
Well,
talk about that in my book too, because a lot of people are like, well, with your career and all the people and your mentors, and don't you want to be in New York or LA or London? And I was like, yeah, I mean, nothing wrong with those cities. I like those cities. I love going there, but I'm a very small fish in a really big ocean in those cities. Now, in a place like Santa Barbara that has an exceptional, group of people living there, people who are world influencers, in every field, but they just happen to live in Santa Barbara because of the location, its proximity to LA and its beauty and everything. It's like, well, I'm a much bigger fish in a much smaller pond, and I'm going to have, if I work here and I can build relationships easier, I can cut out a lot of the middlemen. I'm not competing with 50,000 other people doing what I do. I'm
less
competing
noisy.
with literally 50 people,
Yeah.
not 50,000. So that was a great decision too, because I had access very early on in my career and my consulting to, actors and actresses and CEOs of, people who everyone would know. I was able to work with them and prove myself, and then, build on that. So that was a great decision. I still had access to LA, and still go down to LA a lot. But, being in a small town isn't necessarily a bad thing. There's a
I
lot of
wanted to hone
opportunity
in on that.
pick the right town.
Well, if you spend plenty of time with your decision, then you fully commit to your decision. It's a good,
Exactly. That too.
it's a good way to roll with your intuition. But I wanted to double tap on that because, you've traveled quite far and you met plenty of people that from the smack dab in the middle of Wisconsin. I think anyone listening that maybe they live in rural South Carolina or maybe they're in, mountain town. It's like, don't let your current geographical scenario, your current setting be a limiting factor. It's like you're not a tree, you might have affection towards an area, but you can get up and leave. So I love
Yeah.
hearing that story because, like you said, you can always build relationships and figure out the right way and strategically position yourself. But I think too often it's not just a mental block that people have when it comes to success or personal development, but it's a mental block around their current lot in life geographically. And I love to hear that story. So appreciate that. And one other thing that I want to ask you is you've said the word help as one of your favorite verb when
Have I?
talking to me. I've noticed. And that leads me to the question of servant leadership, which I know is a topic of your book and something you're passionate about. How do you define servant leadership and how can somebody improve that skill and develop it?
Yeah. I mean, it a lot of people say, well, it makes more sense now that you're in a more leadership role and you're the mentor, so to be a servant leader. But you can do it at any place in life, and you can serve up to your mentors and the people who are leaders or people you admire. You can serve them too, but as servant leader, not just serve, but have a servant leader mentality. But I think the servant leader thing is it's really about being more about the relationship and the person and where that's going. And essentially, like the examples in my life have just been about, well, I know that the if you read the forward, one example that I was involved with is when I think about the people who work for me, I know they work for me and I know I'm compensating them. And I know that in that sense, I'm responsible for them. But as a servant leader, I want to take that beyond that they're not just there to work for me. I'm there to help them and to serve them and to, you know, there's always boundaries there, obviously, but I want to be involved in their lives and I want to be stakeholders and I want to help them. And when things are bad, I don't want to just say, oh, well, off you go. Or I want to help them. And I did that with one of my guys who worked for me, who was in a car accident. And, he wasn't working for me at that moment, but he was working for me, during that period of time. And so I decided, it wasn't enough for me to just be like, oh, off he goes. Maybe I'll help pay his salaries while he's gone, while he's still there or whatever. No, I got very involved in helping him with his medical care. I helped with his legal case. I helped investigate his case because one of the main reasons I did that is because I could see the people around him either able to or didn't know what to do. And for me, it was really clear all the steps that needed to be taken around him. And I saw that no one else was doing it. So I knew that I had to step in and serve him in this capacity. People don't realize this. And I know that especially our society today, there's a real different view about the rich and about, when we look at historically, we look at the feudal periods of, you have these
Sure.
these lords and ladies back in England, and they live in these huge castles, and then there's these small towns connected to them, and they're there to, they think they're all there to serve them. But actually back then it wasn't quite that cut and dry. The lords of the manor, that entire town they were responsible for. Those people worked for them and they farmed for them or they ranched for them or whatever they did for them, but they were responsible for the entire town. The kids, the elderly, everybody. So they were the fulcrum of that city, of making sure those people were taken care of. And if someone got injured and couldn't work anymore, they didn't just say, oh, well, go leave and go to another town or let the government take care of you. No, they took care of them for life. They owned their homes and they made sure their homes were satisfactory. And 90% of the time during those periods, obviously there's some bad lords and bad
Sure.
ladies and, bad barons who were treated them terribly, but most of them treated them very well and paid for their educations and provided the school. They provided for the school. They provided for the church to be there. They made sure that the whole community ran and it wasn't just this one thing. So that to me is kind of closer to a servant leadership type of a role where they're trying to serve the people under them, not just look at them as, well, you're a day laborer for me or you're a worker for me. And then
Reciprocal.
whatever
Yeah.
after that, I don't care what happens to you, so that's part of it too. But you can serve upward too. I know with my mentors, they're people who were, I think of my billionaire friend who's like, well, what do you give a billionaire? That relationship was one that I was very careful with. I wanted to make sure that that he always understood that we weren't just friends because he was rich. We became friends. That might have been the initial reason why, because I was intrigued. But as we became friends, we were friends, and nothing to do with the money after that. And so I knew what his likes were. I knew what his interests were. And so if I saw a book that I thought he would like, I'd buy it and send it off to him and say, hey, I think you'd really like this. Or, I was conscientious over time. I'd make sure that, they weren't big things. I didn't go and buy him something expensive. I usually bought him something sentimental or, and he loved that. He appreciated that. And he knew that,
Right.
and I
You
didn't
gave
go
him
to him and
something
ask
that
him for things.
Right.
Yeah.
You gave him something that money couldn't buy, which is genuine human connection and friendship. Like there's plenty of people that I met that are quite successful that may have an estranged relationship with their child or, may have been divorced several times and could be lonely, and I think that what the journey that you've been on, it's been more about the people on the bus or, rowing the boat versus the destination. The destination, sure, you have a direction you're trying to go, which is to help others and accomplish these missions, but really it's the teams that you've surrounded yourself with that seems to be the core locus of attention.
Yeah. And I think I describe it better in the book than I did now about the whole servant leadership idea. But I think the bottom line is it is the whole thing is about the relationships first. And even a lot of my mentors, I have mentors that I never once asked for anything in 25 years. I just enjoyed the relationship other than advice, but I would ask them for other people, but I mean, for myself. I never asked them for myself for anything like, can you do this or that for me? It would be like, no, there's this project coming up and we need to fund it. can you help them, and they'd be like, yes, oh, absolutely. I had this one bank president mentor of mine say one time, I went into, I said, oh, thank you. You're always so generous with all my projects. He says, well, I'm doing the easy part. I'm just writing out this check right now. He says, you're doing all the work, or I should be thanking you. So, but it wasn't about, me coming to them, oh, what can you do to help my career this week? Or, that was extremely, extremely rare that I ever did anything like that. And when I did, I know there was one time I asked for just an introduction, like it was instantaneous. The billionaire guy asked him for an introduction one time, and it was like that day, like this CEO of this company called me, like asking me when we can connect. It's just, it's that kind of a thing where like, he, that here's another interesting story about my friend who's a billionaire, and he had many, many companies he was running, and he was intimately aware of every company. He always said that if my CEO of one of my companies was messing up or something happened to him, I could step into that role tomorrow and take over that company, and I wouldn't miss a beat. So he was very involved. But I'll tell you, I bring that up to say that when I would call him, he would call me back, usually within an hour of calling him. He'd always call me back. And there was only one time he didn't. And I was kind of a little worried. It was like 2 weeks and he didn't get back to me. And it was just really weird. And he finally got back to me and he was apologetic. He said, sorry, I didn't get back to you. And he said, yeah, I was fighting off a merger from his insurance company, which was a pretty big insurance company he was on the board of. Was fighting off a merger from Liberty, which was a little bit bigger insurance company. And he says, yeah, I was fighting off a hostile takeover basically for the last 2 weeks. And I said, well, you know what? That's the best excuse I've ever heard for not calling me back. And it just said something about his character that he valued me, but he also, because I was probably at that time, I was 22, 23, maybe. I don't know how old I was, but he didn't like look at me like, oh, this kid's calling me, pass me off to someone else, or I don't have time, but he'd always call me right back. And so, the busiest people, they say, are the most responsive and get back to you the quickest. And then, you try to reach, I try to reach an intern of mine and like 2 days goes by and he doesn't get back
Well,
to me.
it's
It's
like
just,
it's like the laws of momentum and inertia. An object at rest tends to stay at rest, and an object in motion tends to stay in motion. And that's what
right.
Einstein said about general relativity. It's like, hey, time slows down. You're going fast.
Yep. So it's just, I bring that up because it's just, it was about the character of the person and also just the idea that, yeah, you, there's no such thing as being too busy to do something, it's rarely is that a good excuse. So yeah, people
Yeah.
use that, but it's about relationships, and so if you want to build relationships, you have to also be available to other people too.
hmm
But yeah, there's a lot of books out there about how your network is your net worth. And there's
Right.
truth to that. But I feel like that's a little crass for me. And I feel like my book really focuses more on the relationship factor and not as much about what's the monetary gain at the end of the day of all this. I'm not really focused on what that is or the career advancement. I really been focused on what I call and this is really important actually in the book to me. It's your sphere of influence, and everyone has a sphere of influence. And I use an example of my service manager at my dealership, where I take my car, and he and I have become friends over the years, and I've ended up kind of mentoring him for a while. And it turned out that, this guy is the center of this dealership universe. Even the owners of the company come to him for advice. This guy is like, he's mentored so many people. He knows how to find good talent and cultivate them and get them to do what they need to do. And if he can't, he knows how to help them advance to something else, another job, not
hmm
fire them, but help them get a different job that suits them and work them through that process, or education or whatever. And I've watched him do this with dozens and dozens and dozens, maybe hundreds of young men and women at this dealership, where he's kind of like the mayor, and, and that was his sphere of influence, and he recognized it and he really maximized it. And he was an incredible force for good. And he also had at one time the highest producing, the most profitable service center for BMW in the country for a dealership was his
Wow.
service center, because he was about serving people, not about trying to up them, when they go in to get something fixed and trying to upsell them. He was always about just serving people, and people trusted him. And so anyway, at the end of the day, he knew his sphere and maximized it. I mean, you could be a night watchman and see 3 people a night, and that's your sphere of influence every day. But you could have a tremendous impact, or you're president of the United States, and that's your sphere of influence. But
Right.
I recognized early on, that with my mentors, especially, I had a specific sphere of influence, and felt a responsibility. I didn't have to, but I felt a responsibility to maximize what I could do positively using that sphere of influence. So that's what I did. I would leverage them for other people, other causes, other projects, and that's a good
Your sphere
part of.
was your BMW dealership in the instance of the service manager.
Well, with respect to the serviceman, that was one of my spheres, but my sphere was more than that. But
Right.
that was one small aspect. But for
Comparable
him, yeah,
environment. This is my favorite part of the show, Dennis, and I save it for last. It's called Leave a Question, Ask a Question. So the last guest that I had on, without knowing anything about you, has a question for you, and you have the opportunity to ask the next guest without knowing anything about them, anything
okay,
you'd like.
all right.
The last guest, a question for you is, what is the world you want to live in, and what are you doing now that's stopping it from happening?
What's the world I want to live in, and what am I doing to stop them? Well, I think I would like to live in a world that is less politically divided than it is. I know we all have different points of view, but I would love to have more of a better dialogue with where we're talking about real issues, and we're not talking about rhetoric, and we're not, ad hominem attacks, that we're not creating all these fallacious arguments with each other, whether our cause is good or not, that we could have a real serious intellectual debate about stuff and come to some solutions that way. That would be a great place to go. What am I doing about it myself?
Or what are you
Or
doing now
what
that's stopping
that's
it from
stopping
happening?
me. I probably just aren't doing enough in that area. I mean, I don't,
Hmm.
I would need to really get out there and get behind some organizations and spend some time philosophically to, either aid them in raising money or getting out there and debating more. I did that a little bit. I know there's some groups that I've been involved with, but I probably could do more. I
One thing at
feel
a
like,
time.
there's,
Just finish your
there's
book,
what I can only do one thing at a time, I
Once you
guess,
spend the
one.
time researching and making the decision, I'm sure that when the time comes, the decision is made, it'll be full steam ahead.
Yeah. Yes. Maybe. Again, like I said, I sometimes, I, I'm not one of those people who can't pivot, but I definitely, uh, yeah, I definitely latch onto something if I think it's a good idea, and I just go with it. And yeah,
Now,
and
what
that's been
question
helpful.
do you have for the next guest?
I think the next question would be, yeah, if you could have, who would you have as your mentor? If you could have anyone, dead or living, as one being on your board of directors for life, who could that be? And then what was the other part of the question I needed to ask again?
No, that
You
was it.
said
Just
that
any
was it.
question.
Yeah, I think that would be. I think that would be a good,
That's a good
a
one.
good one. Yeah.
Excellent. This last question is not of philosophical depth. It is, where can people learn more about you, get your book, support the cause, and how can they get in touch? Where can people find what you want them to find?
Yeah, on anything, Amazon, barnesandnoble.com, Target, Walmart, anything online that sells books, you can get my book. I usually push people to Amazon because I'm more familiar with what they do, and they've got it's hard copy, soft copy, digital, and Audible, so you can get any of those. And please, if you like it, leave a review. If you want to learn more about me, go to your board with a number 4 life, your board for life. Go there.com. Yeah, I think everyone should, especially young people, college age, young career people. If they had a board like this, if they had a group of people like this, I think they'd be unstoppable. Probably do more than I ever did. Even there's some people. So I think, but it's deliberate. It You have to be disciplined, like anything else, and you have to want to be open to to change and to be changed through the process. So, but if you want all that, this is, I think, the book for you.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time, Dennis, and thank you everyone
All
listening.
right. Thank you.
Don't run ads in the show, but my only ask for those that are listening is if you found this enjoyable and you found something that was beneficial, share it with a friend. Until next time, be well.